We're going to talk about acids and bases in this lecture. Over the next 21 slides, we're going to explain what acid base is, why it's important that it remains neutral. We're going to talk about the causes of acid base imbalances and the systems within the body that react to and help return acid base back to a neutral status, and see if we can make this make sense. This is probably one of the hardest parts of pathophysiology that we deal with in the advanced EMT program. So what is acid-base balance? Our body strives to maintain a balance between pH, to maintain a neutral pH in our body so that we're not acidic, nor are we a base, but we're neutral. The blood acid-base balance is precisely controlled because even minor deviations in the acid-base balance will cause damage and affect organs. The body will use different mechanisms to control the blood's acid-base balance, and we'll talk about some of those different mechanisms throughout this chapter. So let's start by what is pH. pH is the potential for hydrogen ions in the blood. Changes in the amount of hydrogen ions will change the pH of the cells, tissues, and body. So we're looking at changes in the amount of hydrogen ions in our bloodstream that's going to dictate whether we go to an acidic state or a base or alkalotic state. So it's important to maintain acid-base balance because our cells require homeostasis to function correctly. Remember that cells are the building block of tissues, tissues build organs, and organs build systems, and the rest of it, all the systems come together to build us. Cells require constant supply of glucose, oxygen, and water to maintain normal aerobic metabolism. And aerobic metabolism is when the cells break down fats and proteins to burn ATP for energy. This is how our body is designed for metabolism to work. So when we look at pH balance, we've got to obviously have a scale. So what is a normal pH? 7.35 to 7.45 is a normal pH range for us as humans. If you look at the scale below, anything with a low pH is going to be acidic. So anything to the left of normal is going to be an acidic acid. If you look to the right, it's going to be a base, or as the number goes up, the pH number goes up, it's going to be an overall base. So what happens and how do hydrogen ions affect that? So an acid is going to have an increase of hydrogen ion in the blood. A base is going to have a decrease of hydrogen ions in the blood. So if we look at the perfect pH balance, is going to be perfect homeostasis is that we have a pH of 7.40, total carbon dioxide blood count of 40, and a total bicarb blood count of 24. And that's based on doing a blood draw and getting those figures. But when we look at it from our standpoint in EMS, we're looking to keep it between 7.35 and 7.45 for the pH. And we'll talk about how that's going to occur moving forward in this lecture. So when we look at pH, pH is the most common expression of how we measure acidity. So remember that pH equals the concentration of hydrogen ions in the bloodstream. So what does this really mean? So the lower the hydrogen ions in the bloodstream means the pH is going to be higher, which means the number is going to be higher, and it's going to go to the right side of the scale from neutral, so it's going to be a alkalosis, or our body's going to be in a alkalotic state or a base state. So the higher the hydrogen ion concentration in the blood, means a decrease in pH, which means our numbers are going to go low on the scale. We're going to go to the left of neutral on the scale, and our body is going to be acidic or an acid state. So when we look at those ABGs, those blood gas levels, what we anticipate seeing for normal homeostasis is a pH of 7.35 to 7.45, which matches the scale we're looking at. A arterial oxygen pressure of 75 to 200 millimeters of mercury. And tying this into something else we look at when we're providing ventilations to a patient, we're looking for a partial pressure of carbon dioxide to be between 35 and 45 millimeters of mercury. So if you recall from your prior knowledge and your field experience, that when we're monitoring capnography on intubated patients and even capnography through nasal cannula, we're looking for that expired CO2 to be between 35 and 45 millimeters of mercury. So when pH gets out of whack, man, there is a disturbance in the force, let me tell you. When pH becomes unbalanced, the patient becomes acidotic or alkalotic, depending on which way it goes. How does our body correct that imbalance? So we correct it through three specific parts or three specific ways. The bicarbonate buffer system, which is an automatic response to change in pH. It happens in the background and we don't see it. The respiratory system is also a system that will control and help us eliminate acids or bases from the body depending on which way is higher than the other. The renal system also helps us to control acid base by the excretion of acid through the urine. So in your book is a bucket analogy on the whole process of these three systems working together to maintain homeostasis or maintain acid-base balance. So as the acids and bases fluctuate, the buffer system is going to recognize that very quickly, and it's going to start doing internal things within the bloodstream and the tissues to try to balance the acid bases. You're going to see that denoted in the upper part of the picture where the water faucets have the water dripping down into the first basin. So as the buffer system loses the battle or begins to lose the battle, and the other two systems in our body are going to kick up and start working. The faster of the two systems is going to be the respiratory system, and you'll see that it, we'll tell you how that works in just a few minutes. The slower of the two other systems is going to be the renal system, and we'll describe how that works a little further on in the chapter. So when we're studying as an EMT, an advanced EMT, there are two sets of causes that we look at related to acid-base imbalances. Those causes are metabolic causes and respiratory causes. So we're going to kind of focus here a minute on the metabolic causes of acid-base imbalance. So let's look at metabolic acidosis first, or our body is acidic. So this is when our body has got more acid in the bloodstream than it needs to. And this comes from things like ketoacidosis. Alcohol, chronic users of alcohol will be in a state of ketoacidosis, DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. We'll see patients in the field who are fasting, trying to lose weight, that will put themselves into ketoacidosis, causing a buildup of acid. We'll also see malnutrition. Folks who are malnourished are going to have a buildup of acid in their bodies. Another cause of acid increase in the body is lactic acidosis, which is normally caused by overworking or extremely strenuous exercise, working those muscles, reducing the amount of oxygen supplied to them, thereby producing lactic acids, which is going to increase acids in the body. And renal failure is another case or another medical problem we're going to see where we have metabolic acidosis going on. Our kidneys are not dumping enough acid into the urine to allow us to pass that acid out through urination. So let's look on the other side of the chart now. Metabolic alkalosis, or we're going to become alkalotic. So this is from acid loss. Um, one of the Some of the major causes in that is going to be um, the use of alkali administrations or um, overuse of antacids, intercellular shifts in the hydrogen in the body through the different intercellular and extracellular fluid chambers. Some of the causes that we're going to most see out in the field that bring us to this point is going to be diuretic use, whether it's being used too much incorrectly or the patient isn't drinking enough to match input versus output. We're also going to see it in loss of gastric acid through vomiting and uh, overuse of that antacid. Again, they are respiratory causes of acid-base imbalance as well. So we look at respiratory acidosis. Body is acidic. It comes from an accumulation of carbon dioxide in our bloodstream. Um, we're going to see things that cause us respiratory depression and oxygenation problems that are going to move us into the acidotic state as a result of respiratory problems. So we're going to see things like impairment to the CNS system, things that are going to make us respiratory depressed, brainstem strokes, trauma to the brainstem, certain medications, illicit drug use, such as opioids and benzos. Alcohol is going to be a depressant that's going to depress your respiratory system. Neuromuscular diseases that's going to affect the muscles in the chest to allow for proper ventilation. And of course, the restricted airway diseases that we see and deal with on a daily basis, like COPD and asthma, are going to be causes of acidosis as well. Remember that those restrictive airway diseases are going to have chronic and acute sides to it. Chronically, you're not going to see a whole lot of symptomatic stuff. When they become acute emergencies and acute causes of increased acidosis, you're going to see signs and symptoms such as respiratory depression, respiratory distress, lightheadedness, dizziness, things like that are going to present as signs and symptoms of an acute respiratory problem. Again, on the other side of the chart, on the base or alkalotic side, we're going to see that as we see carbon dioxide decrease in the blood. So we're going to be blowing off a lot of carbon dioxide. In fact, we're going to be blowing off too much carbon dioxide. So we're going to see an increase in respiratory rate and volume. Things like hyperventilation, secondary to anxiety or stimulant use, or other medical conditions that would cause your respiratory rate to increase dramatically are going to lead us into respiratory alkalosis. So again, there are three main components of the buffer system, or in our term, there are three main components that aid the body in maintaining a normal acid-base balance. Those are the buffer system, the respiratory system, and the renal system. So if we look at the buffer system is a fast-acting, quick-acting, and responds directly to changes in the hydrogen ion concentration in extracellular fluid, or ECF. So a buffer is a compound that neutralizes excessive acids or bases to prevent pH from exceeding an acceptable limit. So a buffer can do both. A buffer can absorb and donate hydrogen as needed. So when there is a excessive amount of hydrogen ions in the blood, or we're in an acidic state, then the buffers are going to absorb the acid or absorb the hydrogen and change it into carbonic acid, which is a lot less acidic acid. When our hydrogen levels are low and our body is in an alkalotic state, then that buffer is going to donate hydrogen to the system to try to bring us back toward the neutral spot in the pH balance. Again, this is the buffer system. It's automatic. It happens without us knowing it, and it's working in the background to maintain our acid-base balance. When the buffer system fails to function enough to maintain acid-base balance, then we're going to get off. Our acid base is going to get off. So we look at free hydrogen acids will bond with buffers. We talked about that a minute ago. It will yield a weaker acid called carbonic acid. So looking at the scale and referencing back to what we just said, as hydrogen increases and the buffer is added, the pH will begin to move to the right. So with high levels of hydrogen, we're going to be acidic. So as those buffers introduce and get added to it and start breaking down the carbonic acid, we're going to move from an example of a 1 on the pH scale to the right toward the 7, or to the right toward neutral. And the buffer system is going to fight very hard to get us to that 7. In retrospect, if we have a decrease in hydrogen, a lower than normal hydrogen in our bloodstream, then the buffers are going to add hydrogen to our bloodstream, thereby bringing the pH toward the left of the scale from the high numbers such as 13, 14 toward the 7. So again, the buffer system is balancing that through the use of hydrogen and buffers. But again, at some point, if the buffer system can't bring our acid and bases back in line, we're going to move to the second system and third system helping to do that. The second system is the respiratory system. So the respiratory system converts carbon dioxide and water into carbonic acid so that we can blow off that acid through inhalation and blow it off through exhalation as a gas. So again, the respiratory system is going to regulate blood levels of carbonic acid to maintain a neutral pH. So when carbon dioxide in the blood readily reacts with water to form the carbonic acid, they are initially equal. When the carbon dioxide level in the blood rises due to respiratory depression, the excess of carbon dioxide reacts with water to produce carbonic acid, thereby lowering the pH and moving us back toward neutral. So again, example like holding your breath. When you hold your breath, you're building up the acidotic state of your body. So decreased respirations equals acidosis. As a result, when you let your breath go and try to breathe, you're going to have a rate that is deeper and increased respirations, trying to balance that back out to move you back toward normal or neutral. So again, in the exact opposite way of things, dealing with the respiratory system, increasing the rate and depth of your respiration are going to cause you to blow off too much carbon dioxide. Carbonic acid is not going to be produced to balance out the system, and you're going to become alkalotic and go to the right of the scale over toward the big numbers. So when we have an increase in respiration, such as hyperventilation, diabetic ketoacidosis, things that are going to make that rate and rhythm increase and that depth increase, it's going to move you toward an alkalotic state because you're blowing off too much carbon dioxide. So the third system and the slower system to respond to acid-base imbalance, which could take hours up to days to restore your pH, is our kidneys. So the kidneys account for every molecule, ion, and electrolyte in our circulation. Homeostasis is maintained by the kidneys excreting or retaining products and filtering others out. So the kidneys will excrete acid in an ionic form through urine. So what that means and how this actually works with the renal system is a decrease in urine output, we become acidotic, such as kidney failure, trauma medications that reduce our kidney function. An increase in urine output can cause alkalosis because we're peeing off way too much acid. Things that can cause that are UTIs, polyuria, enlarged prostates, and diabetes. So these are the way that the renal system will control our acid-base balance, and can also throw off our acid-base balance based on what we're experiencing through urine retention and our excessive urine output. Let's review what all we just learned. Acid-base balance has to be maintained in order for normal cellular function to occur. Our body consistently monitors the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood through our chemoreceptors, feeds our information back to our brainstem, and our brainstem then decides, hey guys, we need to do something to make our acid-base balance right again. So it kicks off the bicarbonate buffer system. Bicarbonate buffer system tries to balance, and as that system fails to meet the requirements, then the respiratory system kicks in. It's another fast-acting system to help us remove acids from the body through respiration. And then last, the urinary system is going to kick in, and that's going to take hours to days to correct. So these three systems work together to maintain acid-base balance. Just to review the causes of this whole acid-base imbalance thing. So respiratory causes of acid-base imbalance includes respiratory depression, when the body becomes acidic and builds up acids. Fast respirations, when the body becomes a base or alkalytic and builds up or has a lack of acid in the blood. So when these two things occur, when we have respiratory depression, our ventilations and respirations are too slow, then we need to ventilate, bring them back to the normal level of ventilation. When they're too fast, we need to coach them to slow down, coach them to bring down their respiratory rate, and or ventilate them again if we need to improve or slow down respiratory status and make sure that they're actually exchanging gases when they're breathing that fast. So what respiratory depression does is builds up hydrogen, which makes us acidic. We're not blowing off enough carbon dioxide. Fast respirations, we're blowing off way too much carbon dioxide, and we're becoming alkalotic. Remember the metabolic causes for metabolic acidosis and metabolic alkalosis. Metabolic acidosis is caused by things that increase acid in the body, such as the causes of ketoacidosis, lactic acidosis, and of course renal failure, where our kidneys aren't filtering and adding enough acid to the blood or to the urine to be excreted from the body. The causes of metabolic alkalosis: excessive urination, vomiting, loss of gastric acids, overuse of antacids that takes us to a basic state, and of course the improper use or lack of meeting intake versus output for diuretic use. Those cause metabolic alkalosis. So I hope this helps you. Acid-base balance is quite difficult sometimes to understand, but it is simply our body using the systems inside of it to regulate the balance between acid and base, and getting rid of the hydrogen or using the hydrogen ions to help balance that. So I hope this helps you, and good luck.